Okay, so we've got a bunch of stuff here that folks have sent over about bleeding gums.
Right.
And, it's one of those things I think we've all kind of dealt with at some point.
Definitely. Yeah. Everyone's been there.
And it can be, kind of alarming when you see it.
Yeah, you don't expect to see blood when you're, taking care of your teeth.
Right. It's not a good sign usually.
Exactly.
So I think what we want to do today is kind of dig into all this information
Just
and
say.
figure out, what are the main reasons why this is happening?
Yeah, get to the bottom of it.
And then kind of what does it mean for, just keeping your mouth healthy in the long run?
Right, because it's not just about stopping the bleeding, it's about understanding what's causing it.
Totally. And it seems like there's, six main areas that these sources have kind of highlighted,
Yeah, they all seem to agree on these key factors.
which are gingivitis, periodontitis, vitamin K, diabetes,
Right.
the way we're brushing, and even some medications.
It's a pretty comprehensive list, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's start with gingivitis. I think
Sure.
it's we hear that word a lot, but I think it's worth kind of breaking down what it actually is.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people get confused about gingivitis versus periodontitis.
Right.
So gingivitis is really that initial stage of gum disease, and it's essentially inflammation.
Okay.
And that inflammation is what's causing the redness, the tenderness, and of course the bleeding.
Oh, okay. So it's like a sort of like a general reaction in your gums.
Exactly. It's your body's way of saying, hey, something's not right here.
Gotcha.
Now, the good news is gingivitis is often reversible.
Oh, okay.
If you catch it early enough before too much tartar builds up,
Uh-huh.
you can usually get things back on track with just really good brushing and flossing.
Oh, so it's not necessarily like a dire situation.
Not at this stage, no, but it's definitely a warning sign.
Right. You gotta take care of it.
Exactly.
Okay, so then that brings us to periodontitis, which sounds a lot scarier.
Yeah, periodontitis is basically what happens when gingivitis is left untreated.
Oh, so it's like the next level.
Exactly, and this is where it gets more serious because the infection goes deeper.
Oh.
It starts to affect not just your gums, but the bone that supports your teeth.
Oh, so this is how people end up losing teeth.
That's right. If periodontitis progresses far enough,
Mm-hmm.
it can lead to tooth loss.
Wow.
And at this point, brushing and flossing alone won't cut it.
Right. It's beyond that.
You really need professional dental intervention to get things under control.
So it's like a totally different ballpark.
Absolutely. And this is why those early signs of gingivitis are so important to pay attention to.
So you can catch it before it gets to that point.
Exactly. Prevention is key.
Okay, so moving on from that. One of the things that surprised me in these sources was the connection between vitamin K and bleeding gums.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it?
I wouldn't have thought of that.
Most people don't associate vitamin K with oral health, but it actually plays a crucial role.
How so?
Well, vitamin K is essential for blood clotting.
Right, of course.
So if you're deficient in vitamin K, your blood doesn't clot as effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And that can manifest in a number of ways, including bleeding gums.
Oh, so it's not just that your gums are somehow weaker, it's that your blood isn't clotting properly.
Exactly. It's a systemic issue that can show up in your mouth.
That makes sense.
And this highlights the fact that sometimes what seems like a localized problem
Right.
can actually be a sign of a broader nutritional deficiency.
Oh, that's a really good point.
Yeah, it's all connected.
Okay. Another kind of systemic issue that came up was diabetes.
Right. Diabetes can also increase your risk of bleeding gums.
How does that work?
Well, diabetes can impair blood coagulation as well.
Oh, so similar to the vitamin K thing?
In a way, yes.
Okay.
And it can also make you more susceptible to infections in general.
Right, because high blood sugar and all that.
Exactly. So if you have diabetes, you're more likely to develop gum disease.
Uh-huh.
And your gums may bleed more easily if you do have gum disease.
Wow. So it's like a double whammy?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about brushing, because I think there's some misconceptions about that.
Oh, definitely. A lot of people think that you have to brush really hard to get your teeth clean.
Yeah, I used to think that too.
But actually, it's more about technique than force.
Really?
Yeah, you want to use gentle circular motions and make sure you're covering all the surfaces of your teeth.
Okay.
And flossing is super important too,
Right.
because that gets rid of the plaque and food particles that brushing alone can't reach.
So it's not about like scrubbing away at your teeth.
No, not at all. In fact, brushing too hard can actually damage your gums.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it can cause irritation and even recession, which can lead to bleeding.
So it's like counterproductive.
Exactly.
So gentle brushing and flossing is the way to go.
Absolutely.
Okay. The last thing I want to touch on is medications.
Right, certain medications can also contribute to bleeding gums.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
It's not always the medication itself that's the problem,
Hmm.
but rather the side effects. For example, some medications can reduce saliva production,
Oh, right.
and saliva is really important for washing away bacteria and keeping your mouth healthy.
So if you don't have enough saliva, your mouth becomes a breeding ground for bacteria.
Exactly. And that can lead to inflammation and bleeding gums.
Wow. So it's like an indirect effect?
Right.
Okay, so what should people do if they think their medication might be causing bleeding gums?
Well, the first step is to talk to their doctor
Okay.
and see if there are any alternative medications they could try.
Right, because you don't want to just stop taking your medication.
No, definitely not.
Yep.
You always want to consult with your doctor before making any changes to your medication regimen.
Right, of course.
But sometimes there may be other options available that don't have that side effect.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, it's worth exploring.
So, okay, we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
From gingivitis and periodontitis to vitamin K and diabetes, brushing techniques, medications. It's a lot to take in.
It is, but I think the key takeaway is that bleeding gums are a sign that something's not right.
Right, it's a signal.
Exactly. And it's important to figure out what's causing it.
So you can address the underlying issue.
Exactly.
And I think the best way to do that is to see a dentist.
Absolutely. A dentist can properly diagnose the problem
Right.
and recommend the appropriate treatment.
Whether that's, better brushing and flossing or something more serious.
Exactly.
Okay, so I think that's a good place to wrap up.
I agree.
I guess the final thought I would leave people with is, we've talked about all these different factors that can contribute to bleeding gums,
Right.
but what are some things that people can do to improve their overall oral health?
Yeah, beyond just addressing the bleeding.
Yeah, like what are some habits or lifestyle changes that can make a real difference in the long run?
That's a great question and something for everyone to consider.
Exactly.
Because ultimately, a healthy mouth is a reflection of a healthy body.
Well said.
Thanks.
All right, thanks for joining me today.
It was my pleasure.
And thanks to everyone listening for sending in your questions and sources.
We appreciate your curiosity.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.